I scan objects at the National Museum of Wales, mostly ceramic objects, because I am doing a PhD in ceramics. And then I think about these scans and work with them occasionally. I wanted to start off by showing you a comic book, because I thought this might be appropriate to the situation, not so sure now. And this is The Secrets of the Fortress of Solitude, which is a Superman comic, and in it, Superman has a museum, and in this museum, to make briefly, he keeps casts of himself and all of his friends and murals depicting his greatest achievements. And in this museum, he also has a tiny city within a bottle. This is a real living city which was shrunk by an evil person. And eventually it gets resized again, and then he has to give it away, which makes it very sad. So I presented him with an exact copy of his city. I don't wear that uniform anymore, but I still work in the same kind of way. I make copies of real things. And in this process, they change meaning. It was alive, now it's just a thing inside a glass bottle which looks like the original, and that's the kind of meanings that I'm searching for and looking at through my work. These are the amazing tools that I use. I wish they had more chrome on them to look that exciting. This is an X-Engine tabletop scanner. It's not top of the range, but it does its job, and I get to use it for free. And this is a fusion deposition modeler that we have in our design department. The object that when drawn was made on this one. It works by building up layers of plastic. It's got a plastic thread, and then heats it up and slowly builds the object the way you want it. The desktop X-Engine scanner comes with its own software. It's very basic. It allows you to stick scans together because you can never get the whole object in one go. It's got a little platform. You can put an object on it, rotate it, get 360-degree scans, and then usually I do bracket scans of whichever part of the object is still missing. I work with the ceramics collections, mostly ceramics from the storage collections at the National Museum of Wales, and the scanner tends to get confused because it works with a laser and ceramics have a laser surface. So I usually spray them with foot powder before I scan them, which the museum are so happy about that they tolerate it. But there's always bits that I can't spray, for example the bottom where they have their little paper labels, because they are quite keen on keeping those labels where they are. So there's always bits missing from the scans, and these have to be edited, in which I mostly do on Blender. I'm not brilliant, but I can fix holes and get rid of the manifolds and prepare those files for printing. I usually use STL files for printing. So that's a screenshot of me trying to fix it on Blender. But in this process, when I tell people that I scan museum objects, they usually think that this is a very subjective kind of way of creating copies of objects. But through the fact that I have to edit them, that I have to fix holes, that when the scans are blended together, you tend to use some detail. And also through the fact that the software I'm using was written by humans, a lot of objectiveness creeps in, so I get close resemblances of the original pieces, but I do not get subjectively accurate copies. During my masters, I would use the scans to create prints, to then again create ceramic pieces from them. And for this, I would cast them in plaster and then use slip casting to recreate them and then manually alter them. Now, this mode of reproduction uses continuous physical medium, and there's a writer, Nelson Goodman, I think, and in his book, Languages of Art, he refers to this as, I think, continuous physical notation. Whereas when I scan objects, they get translated into something else. They get written down, and this is where I don't really know what I'm talking about, but they get written down as code, which is a sort of score that then can be performed. And in the context of the museum, this is quite interesting because the museum is always very keen on preserving the real artifact, something that is authentic. And when we're looking at objects that exist within the digital museum, they become something else. And before we had this sort of thing, all objects, all 3D objects were in continuous medium. This includes photographs even. You start with a photograph in film and then you can print it off into something else. But now with scanning, I'm actually working with symbolic notation. I'm working with this score. I'm working with an object that is noted down and then gets performed either through 3D print or through the display. Even that is a sort of translation of the real thing, which is hiding somewhere in the computer and I can't get to it. Now Goodman goes on to say that you can only have a fake or a copy of an artifact when you do not have symbolic notation. And the easiest way to describe this is again music. If I have a musical score and then I perform it, I am not creating a fake of the original, I'm just reproducing the music the way it is supposed to be reproduced. This means that if I have an object which comes from the computer, which is digitally born, and I print it, and then I print it again, and then I print it again, none of these prints can actually be a fake because they in themselves are only performances of the notation which is inside the computer. And I'm doing a small project, I'm part of a small knowledge exchange project with the V&A Museum and some other partners. And this project started because they bought, I think it was a table which was made on a rapid prototyping machine, and it then started to deteriorate quite quickly. So we are now supposed to find out how to preserve 3D prints, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that they're looking at the wrong thing, because perhaps what they bought was not what they thought they bought. It wasn't the object, it was just a performance of the object. So I think this kind of technology forces museums to rethink how they consider authenticity, the object and the fake, and where the aura that we get so excited about actually lies. To kind of have more fun with these questions, I decided to start using my 3D scans and share them with other people. Also because I'm not actually very good at creating interesting things with them. So I've started writing to lots of different artists. These are some of the people I've gotten on board already. Mike Eaton used to be a ceramicist, now he uses mostly, I think, blended to explore traditional ceramic forms. He also uses liquid prototyping. This is John Rainey, he's a recent graduate. He also uses images from the real world and then creates 3D sculptures from them, which he then prints. I've also got a couple of designers. On the bottom right, I'm very excited about this guy. He's also a good friend of mine. I'm Mally from Lickenbach, who teaches game design in Zurich. And his games are usually more kind of little artistic pieces than anything else. But while I do like having these people on board, I think they're also very much focused on the performance, on the 3D print, and on the way this looks on a video screen. And I would kind of like to have someone who can actually look at what's underneath it. I have no idea how code works. I know there's lots of different layers of translation, and right at the bottom you have little zeros and ones. But I've got this idea that, for example, you could take these little zeros and ones, and then instead of actually making an object with them, perhaps they could be turned into music and read in a different way. And in the end, I'm going to exhibit all the results of this project back in the museum next to the original objects, so that they start to have a little conversation with each other. And that's why I'm here basically. I'm desperately searching for people to help me out. Thank you, that's it. It's just a short
Do you have an example of the actual computer code that makes up the object?
I don't even know how to look at the actual
In a text pad. Word. It's probably just a load of numbers, comments.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Does anyone here, has anyone opened up such a program and looked at the
It
code?
depends on what format it's in.
Are we talking about the code itself for the 3D print?
In Blender or? Yeah.
The 3D...
From a scan,
With a 3D printer, I'm sure maybe a few people here know, you have the model, which is turned into a mesh, so a sort of blender program. But then it has to be sliced.
It is sliced, but I'm
And it's
actually
made into
talking
these
about
printable layers, yeah.
before I slice it, I have it as a scan, and I can save that into different formats. STL, OBJ, there's a couple of other formats I can export it into.
So can you, Sean, do you know if you can open an STL file in a text pad or something like that?
Well, you can. I don't know if
Fairly big, wouldn't
it? That human readable. It's quite a dense format. In fact, I've been playing with some very simple STL generators on the iPad because one of the problems with 3D printing is I think it's a very complicated process. You have to understand how to scan it in and get the files and edit them and clean them up and then turn them and slice them and so on. Whereas some of the newer tools that are coming out for mobile devices will let you draw and then you'll stretch the drawing, the doodle, and then you press print and it'll appear on the 3D printer. So it's compressing that process, so you create and you print just like a Word document. And for 3D printing, I know it's not so relevant to your work, but 3D printing, I think that's really important. So that it demystifies the process a little bit.
But there is already software online that you just feed a faulty STL file into, and then it gives you back something that is ready for 3D printing. Because a lot of people use stuff like Shapeways now, and they're not necessarily genius for this sort of thing. So a lot of stuff is coming out. That's basic, but it does the job.
Just a quick observation on Nelson Goodman and sort of performance. I think it's an interesting idea that the 3D objects are sort of performance of the original. I quite like that. But he said in sort of allographic material, which is like musical scores, for instance, the authenticity comes from the performance itself. That you can judge a performance as to whether it's more authentic or not, according to other criteria. But obviously, the actual score can be copied quite easily. So I'm just wondering if there's a different sort of authenticity criteria in your sort of work.
I don't really know. This is why I want to have these things and actually put them into the museum. I suspect that this notion of authenticity and the aura of the object actually comes from its display, nothing else. And this might very much be the case. Ceramic objects are quite interesting because they usually have a lot of kind of emotional attachment with them. Ceramic objects often get preserved primarily through being passed on through families. They are quite fragile, but they're very sturdy at the same time, so they can become this kind of emotional symbol of preserving, caring for something, mother to daughter, and so forth. But within the museum, they're not displayed in this way. This kind of history gets lost. So if that is used as an excuse to choose one physical manifestation over the other, I don't really think that much is worth it.
Did you send me an email?
I did, and you never replied, shame.
It was 2 days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 2 days ago.
Yes. So I'm interested in, I have some ideas. Maybe we could chat. And also, it's interesting because I have a friend who's a composer. If you want to do the same thing, but the other way around, I think.
Yeah.
You want to make a score as an object of value. So people who buy the score as an object.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe because you want to make money, I don't know. But he was interested, in this idea that why the composer just create instructions and they cannot sell the instructions.
Why don't they? Yes, this idea that you have something and then it can be so many different things. The idea that you can take an object and turn it into sound, and you can take sound and turn it into a drawing which can become an object. I like that. It kind of dissolves the museum from the inside. It dissolves this idea of classification, of materialism, which the museum can be guilty of. It kind of steps over that, and I think it's quite interesting.
Right. I will reply then.
Yeah, wonderful.
Sarah, do you have cards at all for people, so if anyone's interested that they can...
I don't have cards, but if you're interested, just write down your email address for me, and I've got a shared Dropbox folder. It's already got 3 scans in there. I'll keep on adding them, and I'll just send you my contacts, and then